You almost missed it. That moment when you swallowed your pride. When you stayed silent instead of exposing them. When you chose integrity over revenge and walked away without applause. You thought you were just surviving. But heaven was watching. While they plotted behind closed doors, while they whispered your name with smirks and subtle sabotage, something far greater was unfolding in the unseen realm. You weren't being ignored. You were being tested. And here's what they never understood. The silence wasn't weakness. The delay wasn't rejection. The isolation wasn't punishment. It was an exam. And without even realizing it, you passed. Now something is shifting. Doors that were locked feel loose. Energy around you feels different. And the very people who thought you failed, they're about to witness what happens when God rewards his chosen quietly and all at once. You thought it was just another hard season. Another quiet betrayal. Another room where your name was mentioned, but your voice was never invited. It felt personal. It felt unfair. But it wasn't random. You were placed in moments designed to press every wound you thought had already healed. They lied about you, softly. They excluded you strategically. They watched for a reaction. And you felt it, didn't you? That surge in your chest. That urge to expose everything. To send the message. To clear your name. You could have burned it all down. Instead, you paused. In another room, they smirked. They mistook your silence for surrender. They told themselves you were too weak to defend yourself. Too naive to see what they were doing. They celebrated early. What they didn't know was that your restraint was being recorded in a place they could not access. Heaven wasn't measuring their schemes. It was measuring your response. Every insult was a question. Every delay was an evaluation. Every closed door whispered, "Will you still trust?" And you did. Not perfectly. Not without tears. But you stayed aligned. You refused to poison your spirit just to prove a point. You walked away with your integrity intact, thinking you had simply survived. But if that was the test, then what exactly is the reward? And why does everything suddenly feel like it's about to shift? There was a moment, you remember it clearly, when everything inside you screamed, "Say it. Expose them. End this." You had the proof. Screenshots. Conversations. Subtle inconsistencies that could unravel their carefully constructed image in seconds. One message. One public correction. One sharp sentence delivered at the right time, and the entire illusion would collapse. You imagined it. The shock on their faces. The scrambling. The apologies disguised as explanations. And for a second, your fingers hovered over the trigger. But something deeper stopped you. Not fear. Not weakness. Restraint. You leaned back instead of forward. You breathed instead of reacted. You let the silence stretch longer than your pride was comfortable with. And in that silence, something invisible moved. They noticed your quiet, but they misunderstood it. In their private conversations, they smirked. "See?" They told each other. "We knew they wouldn't do anything." Your composure emboldened them. They grew louder. Sloppier. More convinced that you were unaware, incapable, or too fragile to confront them. They didn't realize you were fully aware. You simply chose elevation over explosion. What they called passivity was actually discipline. What they labeled weakness was spiritual authority under control. Because you understood something they didn't. Not every battle is meant to be fought in public. And in the unseen realm, your silence carried weight. It wasn't empty. It was obedient. There are moments in life where destiny hinges not on what you do, but on what you refuse to do. That was one of them. A crossroads disguised as an argument. A promotion disguised as humiliation. You walked away without applause. But the atmosphere shifted after that day, didn't it? Subtle. Almost imperceptible. Conversations changed tone. Opportunities started aligning in strange ways. Protection appeared where exposure was expected. Why? What did that single decision activate? And if your silence triggered something beyond their understanding, what else has already been set in motion? They thought they were ahead. From their perspective, the evidence was obvious. You weren't in the inner circle anymore. Your invitation slowed. Your name wasn't mentioned in rooms that once welcomed you. They measured success by visibility, and by that standard, they believed you were fading. They mistook positioning for power. What they couldn't see was the other scoreboard. While they were counting applause and alliances, something higher was counting integrity. Every time you chose patience over pettiness, something accumulated. Every time you refused to gossip in return, something strengthened. Every time you surrendered the need to defend yourself immediately, something was recorded. You felt like you were losing, but you were being trusted. They took shortcuts. They whispered narratives. They aligned themselves with whoever seemed strongest in the moment. It looked strategic. It looked smart. It even looked successful. But shortcuts create unstable foundations. And foundations are tested by weight. Meanwhile, your discipline was building something slower, heavier, unshakable. You didn't see it forming. You only felt the loneliness, the confusion, the quiet ache of being misunderstood. Yet even in that ache, you didn't compromise who you were. And then subtle things began to change. A conversation you weren't supposed to overhear revealed cracks in their unity. A door that had been closed for months suddenly reopened without effort. Someone who once doubted you began speaking your name with caution, almost respect. You sensed it before you understood it. The momentum was shifting. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Strategically. Because reward doesn't always arrive as celebration. Sometimes it arrives as repositioning, moving you where influence can grow without interference. And here's the part they never prepared for. One of the very people who contributed to your testing is about to experience a reversal. Not because you exposed them, but because truth has weight. And weight always settles where it belongs. It didn't start with applause. It started with cracks. The same plans they once executed flawlessly began to stall. Messages went unanswered. Agreements dissolved without explanation. The alliances they depended on started to feel unstable. In private, they reassured each other. It's nothing. Just timing. But beneath the surface, something was slipping. You felt it too, but differently. Where their confidence thinned, your clarity sharpened. Where their control weakened, your peace deepened. You weren't chasing anything anymore. You weren't trying to fix narratives or reclaim spaces that had rejected you. Strangely, you no longer needed to. And that's when the shift accelerated. One of them, one who once spoke over you, dismissed you, quietly questioned your worth, found themselves in the exact position they had engineered for you. Misunderstood, excluded, uncertain. The room they controlled no longer moved at their command. They didn't see it as karma. They saw it as coincidence. But you know better. Because while they scrambled to regain influence, you received something unexpected. A call, an invitation, an opportunity that contradicts every story they told about you. It doesn't come from their circle. It comes from beyond it, cleaner, higher, untouched by their interference. And here's the part that unsettles them most. It's visible, not flashy, not boastful, but undeniable. They witness it in real time. The promotion, the recognition, the subtle elevation that places you beyond their reach. You never fought them. You outgrew them. And as their discomfort turns into quiet realization, one question lingers in the air, heavy, unanswered. If this is only the beginning of the reversal, what happens when the full reward arrives? The reward doesn't explode into your life. It settles. It lands with quiet authority, like something that was always meant to be yours but had to wait for the right version of you to receive it. And suddenly, the atmosphere changes. You walk into rooms now and the energy shifts, subtle, but undeniable. Conversations pause for a fraction of a second. Eyes measure you differently. Not with pity, not with suspicion, with recognition. The same people who once overlooked you now choose their words carefully. They reference your name with a new tone. Respect replaces dismissal. Curiosity replaces quiet mockery. You didn't announce your elevation. They observed it. In third-person silence, your former adversaries replay their past assumptions. They remember the moments they underestimated you. The times they assumed your quiet meant incapability. The decisions they made believing you would never rise beyond their narrative. They miscalculated. Because what was happening to you wasn't a comeback. It was confirmation. But here's what makes this different from revenge fantasies. You don't feel triumphant. There's no urge to say, "I told you so." No need to humiliate anyone. No hunger to reverse the embarrassment. Instead, you feel something unfamiliar.
Peace.
You realize the true reward was never just the opportunity or the recognition. It was the transformation. You're no longer reactive. No longer desperate to correct every misunderstanding. No longer shaken by whispers in rooms you cannot enter. You pass something. And the evidence isn't just external positioning, it's internal stability. Meanwhile, they wrestle privately with a truth they can't say out loud. You were never behind. You were protected, redirected, preserved for something they couldn't access. And now the gap between you is no longer social. It's spiritual. But as powerful as this vindication feels, a new awareness settles over you. If this was one level of testing, and this is the reward attached to it, then what level of influence are you being prepared for next? Because elevation always comes with responsibility. And something tells you, the next assignment will require even more of who you've become. Now you understand. The betrayal was never the story. The delay was never the punishment. The silence was never abandonment. It was preparation. You stand in this new season not as someone who survived opposition, but as someone refined by it. The version of you that once needed validation would not have been able to carry this weight. The version of you that reacted emotionally would have sabotaged this elevation. So the test came first. Betrayal trained your discernment. You see intentions faster now. You sense shifts in energy before words are spoken. Silence strengthened your authority. You don't rush to prove yourself anymore. Delay built endurance. You no longer panic when doors close, you evaluate. Isolation sharpened your intuition. You weren't being broken. You were being built into someone who can handle influence without being intoxicated by it. And here is the revelation that changes everything. God rewards capacity, not desire. You wanted more before. More recognition. More fairness. More justice. But wanting is different from being ready. So heaven waited until your character could sustain what your ambition once demanded. Meanwhile, those who tried to test you without realizing it played their role perfectly. In third-person hindsight, they now see the shift. They feel the distance. They sense that access to you is no longer automatic. They didn't lose you. They outgrew their permission to define you. And now you move differently. Not louder, just clearer. Not defensive, just grounded. You understand that higher levels come with sharper scrutiny. Greater influence attracts greater examination. There will be another test. But this time, you won't mistake it for rejection. You'll recognize it as refinement. Because now you see the pattern. Pressure precedes promotion. Silence precedes strategy. Testing precedes trust. They thought they were evaluating your limits. But God was measuring your readiness. And now that you've passed without even knowing you were being examined,
Tell me,
what happens when you walk into the next storm fully aware that it's not there to break you, but to crown you?